I had the honor and pleasure of speaking with Gene Billingsley, one of the founders of GMT Games. Our topic of conversation: what are the games that built this great company? In episode 2, we're going to look at the games released between 2006 and 2013 here on Legendary Tactics.
All right, so game number 6 in 2006, Combat Commander Europe and Mediterranean, we did them separately by Chad Jensen. So this game brought us Chad and Kai Jensen. What a team. Um, every team that we've had, the Berg Herman team was unique. Um, the Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews team, unique. Maybe none more unique than Chad and Kai Jensen. A designer and developer. I I was blessed to be able to hear a lot of their design development conversations, and the ones that were at elevated volume uh, occasionally, um, because neither one of them is a shrinking violet. Like, Chad knew exactly what he was about, and he knew what he wanted. He's a brilliant designer. And Kai also was one of the few people in the world that could tell him exactly what he needed to hear when he needed to hear it, when it was like not positive. So they were a great team that way. Also, they loved each other, and they lived games and each other. And I just there's two more people that they're just really close friends over the years. And when Chad passed, it was a long time before Kai and I could have a phone conversation where one or both of us wasn't crying. So that's the bad thing about 35 years is that people pass. Richard Berg passed. We're coming up on the anniversary, 6 years of Richard's passing in about a month. And, it leaves a hole in your heart for everybody that was your friend. So, it's you're not as close with everybody because that we're human beings. But Chad was somebody special to me. And to this day, Kai is a member of our family. My wife and daughters and son all know that if Kai needs anything, she gets it. And I don't mean that from GMT side. I mean that from our family, that, we would take care of her and will if we need to, because we love her. She's a close friend. Um, so Combat Commander brought us Chad Jensen and brought us something that only one person had ever done. Um, I didn't talk about this other 2005 game. 2005 was kind of a banner year for us. Um, we did Twilight Struggle, we did Commands and Colors Ancients, and we did Empire of the Sun from Mark Herman. And it's not on this list, but it could be. And it had the distinction of being the first CDG that was a hex-based card-driven game. And and if you played it, it's brilliant. It's hard to get into sometimes it's so different is why it's hard to get into. It's just getting your head around what Mark is doing. But once you do, you're like, oh my gosh, this is genius. Well, Chad also did a card-driven CDG. I mean, a hex-based CDG, but a totally different scale. Who would have thought? Um, it's not ASL goes to card-driven game, but it's that genre with the card-driven game, and it came with Boku battle packs and a Pacific and everything you want with World War II and what 100 different scenarios or something. And the best thing about it is probably the scenario generator. It's it's amazing. You
Yeah.
can you can play that all day long and have better scenario. In fact, when they brought it to me, Chad said, the game was the scenario generator. And I said, wargamers aren't going to buy this unless you have historical scenarios. So Chad said a few choice words, and and wargamers, me, aimed at me mostly. And but then he went and did it. And I'm glad he did because, we sold that. We sold the battle packs. But he was right. I mean, I think I was too, because I really don't think they would have bought it without historical scenarios.
Yeah,
But
I
once you
think,
get
yeah.
through those and you go play the scenario generator, you go, dang, this is really good. And so, it brought us Chad and Kai, and it brought us a whole different major brand and line for GMT, which even now we're adding to. This year you saw Combat Commander Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the two designers for that, they saw the genius in that scenario generator. And they said, we want to build something that builds operations outside of it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You've got a scenario generator, and now we could build Vietnam operations and then go inside those big operations and play the small battles. So I'm really, really excited as a gamer. I'm very geeked out about what they're doing with chat system. And all these years later, 20 years later, here's Kai supporting these guys in every way, helping people continue Chad's games. We're doing now a 20th anniversary um, deluxe edition of Combat Commander with both Europe and uh, Mediterranean in the same pack. And Kai's been right in the middle of that. And with the Vietnam guys, I told them right away, I said, look, I gave them all the research that Chad and I had done, because Chad and I were going to do Vietnam originally. And then I said, look, you don't have to feel like you have to use any of that research. But what you do have to do is run anything by Kai, because she has the final say on anything with Combat Commander. That's how Chad would want it, and that's how I'm going to do it. So anyway, I mean, you could see over time what all these people add to GMT. If nobody's leaving, sadly, occasionally somebody's passing. And you just continue to build these design teams, and we've tried to build a very collaborative environment where everybody learns and grows from each game. So, they will tell you they've all heard the speech. They come in and they're having problems. And I say, well, if it makes you feel better, this is the worst game we're ever going to do together. And they're just not used to hearing it that way. But that's what happens. If you work together with teams and you're all growing and learning, then you just get better together. And that's really what's happened with GMT. Except that there's this idiot that runs it that doesn't know how to say no to good new designers. And so I'm never satisfied that, okay, we've got these design teams that have worked with us forever and they're great, because I still see new design teams who have great ideas, who have all this energy. And I'm like, yeah, they fit with us. So we end up with 100 designers, which is crazy. But that's how we never hurt for content, because we're just publishing what these amazing designers are passionate about this year. All right, let's just do number 7, because here's another guy. And by the way, 2006 was almost as good as 2005, because it brought us Combat Commander and it brought us Here I Stand from Ed Beach. So, for people that don't know, Ed Beach is the designer of Civilization 7 on the computer, and more than that. But he's as good as it gets in the digital world, and he's a longtime board wargamer,
Hmm.
and created Here I Stand, this up to 6 player. I don't even know how to describe it. It's something you have to experience to realize how good it is. And then Virgin Queen right on top of that. And then recently they did Tonto Monta, which takes it to another level. And so, but working with Ed, who was really good friends with Andy Lewis, so he kind of was related to us to start with. He's somebody we would see at WBC. Um, Ed brought us multiplayer games, the like of which we didn't have in the line. And to this day, you'll read people online saying, I get to play Here I Stand once a year, but I look forward to that day when I get to play it with, with my friends. So these are not, I mean, Here I Stand was what, it's our top 11, I guess, our 11th best-selling game. And I think Virgin Queen is in like 15 or something, but those will probably never be top bestsellers for us because they're multiple player games, unless somebody comes out with an amazing solo version that just everybody runs to. But part of the fun is, you don't know what those other five players are going to do. Anyway, really happy to have both Here I Stand and Ed Beach on our team. The In 2011, the eighth game that built GMT was Sekigahara. And Matt Calkins, it brought us Matt Calkins. Matt Calkins is a longtime board gamer who happens to run a huge company, and like way more huge than any company in our industry. And he's a really smart businessman, brilliant guy who happens to be a really amazing designer. And I'm not going to say any more words about that except just to say, go play Sekigahara. That game defines elegance in the game design. It just, everything flows. It fits together. And I'm so glad it's part of our line. It's not really a series. Other companies have tried to sort of copy it, but we haven't used it to build five more games like Sekigahara. Sekigahara just kind of stands by itself, and yet it's our number seven bestseller all time. We've sold, I don't know, 5 or 6 print runs of it. And Matt has done some other games for us. I really like his Charioteer game. It's kind of just starting to, I don't know what's going to happen with Charioteer. Sometimes we have a game like that that doesn't sell amazing out of the chute. I mean, Twilight Struggle was like that. But then people start playing it at conventions and they go, this is really fun. I think Charioteer is just as genius as Sekigahara.
Yeah.
It just hasn't sold as well yet. So hopefully, the word will get out and we'll do a good job of getting the word out. And because who doesn't like a good racing game, especially chariots? It's it's pretty easy to learn. Once you know what's going on, you're like, oh wow, I could play this all day. But it's unpredictable, right? You don't know what's going to happen next. It's almost in a way like coin where you get to see the next card. You know what I mean? Like you can see what's coming a little bit, but and so I don't know. I think it's fun. Another game in 2011 was Labyrinth. That that brought Volko Ruhnke back to us.
Mm.
He had done Wilderness War in 2002, and that was a really good CDG. And to this day, it's a good CDG for us. And then Volko got really up to his elbows in the war on terror, in real life. And so he was out of the hobby for a lot of years. In 2009, I think, maybe it was 10, but I think maybe it was 2010. We were in Tempe, Arizona together at John Kranz's Concept Expo. And one night we started talking about games and, just in passing, because I knew what his real life was and I wasn't trying to, mess that up for him. But I told him straight up, I said, I really wish you'd do some more games for us because Wilderness War was amazing. And he said, I don't have time right now. And that was the truth. And so I pitched him a game. I said, I think maybe we could do like Twilight Struggle, but the War on Terror. And we talked about that for like 4 hours one night. And right before he went to bed, he goes, it won't work. And I'm like, okay. So I get up the next morning and I go to breakfast. And Volko comes in, sits down by me, looks at me, and goes, I figured it out. I go, figured what out? And he goes, the game we were talking about last night. I know how to make it work. He goes, I'll send you a prototype. And so, with most designers, that would mean like 6 months from now, when they got it all worked out, there'd be a prototype. A month later, I had a prototype on my game table downstairs in my house. And doggone if it wasn't 98% of what we ended up publishing the next year. I mean, Volko just, he brought this together in his head. He went home and he put it on a board and, boom, it was done. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned at how quickly he put that together. And so I'm really glad that we went from it won't work to I figured it out. I know how to do it, but overnight. That's so typical Volko. I love and he's become a good friend of mine, and Jill, his wife, is a good friend of my wife, Mary. And we've gone on vacation together a few times and had some fun together that way. I gravitate to people who are, I mean, because of my job, I work with people who are really smart, right? I mean, the guys that do these kind of games, they're smart. And sometimes those guys also come with an ego because the world being what it is, right? Now, most of those guys don't end up staying working with GMT because we don't have an environment like that. Volko is one of the guys that could easily be the smartest guy in the room in pretty much any room, but you would never ever know it from the way that he carries himself. He's a terrific listener. He's really great at drilling down on problems. He doesn't have to be right. Um, he's a lifetime learner. He wants to learn more. He's gracious to other people. He gives people credit. Look, he's let people use his coin series to create these other games. He's just incredibly generous that way. So having Volko back designing games for us, and Labyrinth is a big seller for us, like our number 7 all-time bestseller. But the next year, he started the coin series, and pretty soon, what are we, 12 or 14 games into the coin series from this
Yeah.
guy that wasn't doing games because he was too busy. That was a big deal for
Yeah.
GMT in terms of building our company, just what Volko himself has brought to us. And I guess I would just say to slide into number 10. Number 10 is Cuba Libre, which didn't happen until 2013. And of course, Andean Abyss was the first game in the coin series, but Cuba Libre is the one that really allowed it got the coin series out there to a lot more people because it was so approachable, so easy to get into. And so that just kind of opened the doors to this for what us has become a huge, huge series. And maybe my favorite game at GMT, which is Fire in the Lake,
Yeah.
came from that series. By the way, a collaboration with Mark Herman and Volko Ruhnke. I mean, it's pretty hard for even me to screw that up, right?
Yeah.
I recruited those guys for that game because Mark was working on a CDG, kind of like We the People or Washington's War for Vietnam. And by the way, that would have been a great game, and we would have all liked to play it. And Volko had this coin series, and I love Vietnam. I mean, just the study of Vietnam. I've done some games on it here and there, but you want to pitch a game to me if it's a Vietnam game, you got a pretty good chance. So I said, have you guys thought about maybe putting these together? And after that, it was mostly all them. They got together and talked about it, and pretty soon, Mark had a card deck, but it was for CDGs. And so they ended up using most of that card deck for the game, but Voco had to go in and like coin eyes it, and make it, coins got one for you and one against you, kind of, and make it work that way.
Yeah.
But great collaboration, and it started with, like you say, Mark Herman doing a game for us and eventually CDGs for us, and Voco, yet another CDG guy, but somebody that created this big coin series. They're both people, by the way, Mark Herman's another guy like that. I said he could be the smartest guy in most rooms, but he doesn't feel the need to let you know that. That is the secret of GMT, really, is people like that at every level, just really competent uh, people who are committed to growing at their craft that don't have to get all the credit, that don't have to be acknowledged as the best, brightest, smartest. I mean, we try to acknowledge everybody, right? But that's different from somebody standing up and saying, this is about me. And that's just not our way. GMT is not about any one person. There are 10 games that we talked about. Probably what, 15 designers in those 10 games that we talked about.
Yeah.
And yet we've got 100 designers. And all of those people have had an impact. You know, we talked about Mark Simonich early as an artist, right? Think about all the hex and counter games that Mark Simonich has done. And we sell maybe 5, 10,000 of those games. So maybe they're not the Twilight Struggles. But how many people love GMT because of Mark Simonich games? So, you know, I don't want this list of 10 to sound like these are the only ones I think are important. It's really hard to pick a list. On my list, and you saw my honorable mentions. You know, we went up through 2013. Maybe one of these days, if you feel like it, we'll do like the next generation, the games that build GMT, because it's been 12 years since 2013. And we have people like John Butterfield in that period, you know, obviously legends in the industry before they ever came to GMT. We have a design team doing this Combat Commander Vietnam. These guys may well end up being the Mark Herman Richard Berg of the next 30 years. I mean, it could happen. I don't know. I hope we can be um, a birthing place for that kind of longevity and creative engagement in the hobby. So maybe we could do that someday. Look at the next generation. They're definitely out there. You look at our P500 list, and there's names that you know that are comfortable. You go, oh, yeah, I'm buying that game. And then there's games you're like, who the heck is that? Well, I'll tell you, for every who the heck is that, there's somebody or group of somebody's inside GMT who has said, that guy or that gal is one of our type. You know, there's somebody who's smart and creative and making games they're passionate about, and they play well with others. So that's, I think, our secret sauce is what those teams are able to do together. And so that's my
Yeah.
list.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much for all the stories. It's always so fascinating to get these, the kind of the history of our hobby, and all of kind of the fun stories and the personalities and the people that are continuing to add to, the amazing gameplay experiences and designs and so forth that are part of our hobby. It's such an exciting time to be in the hobby where it's not just hex and counter anymore. There's all these as Volko puts it, tools in the toolbox for designers to use.
Yeah, I agree with that. And people like Volko and Mark Herman who are so generous with their time and with their systems, letting other people use them. Kai is the same way, stepping in for what Chad would have done, I know, um, saying, you know, who wants to continue Combat Commander.
Yeah.
And so I like that generosity of spirit speaks volumes about those people and the quality of their character.
Yeah.
Just
And
I'm just happy I get to be along for the ride with them.
yeah. Well, I think it's your generosity giving your time today, and your busy day to let us know about these great games. And I hope our viewers will delve in and give these ones a try because they've obviously stood the test of time. And so that's great. I'd love to do a, 20 since 2012,
Yeah,
retrospective or something as well, or that'd
we
be
could do
great
that
to do.
sometime. Just
Yeah,
let
absolutely.
me. I've got a few things on my plate right now, but
Yes, that's
uh,
all right. As I said, I really do appreciate your time today. So, uh,
absolutely. And I've
yeah,
enjoyed this, and just know that I appreciate what you guys do for the hobby.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for your kind words.